I'm Dr. Mark Lewis. Welcome to Emerging Technology Horizons, brought to you by the National Defense Industrial Association's Emerging Technology Institute. Um, on today's broadcast, we have Tracy Frost, who is the director for the Department of Defense Manufacturing Technology Program, the ManTech program. Some biographical details on Ms. Frost. She took over the program in April of 2016 as the director of the DoD ManTech program. And in that role, Tracy actually helps coordinate collaboration across the military services and the agencies in order to reduce acquisition, supportability, manufacturing, and repair cycle time costs for defense weapon systems. In that role, Tracy also looks at cross-cutting defense manufacturing needs and looks at ways to stimulate early development of manufacturing processes and enterprise business practices as well that achieve cost-effective solutions for our warfighters. Ms. Frost has had a very distinguished career in the Department of Defense. Prior to leading the ManTech program, she spent 7 years managing small business programs for the Office of Naval Research's SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Program, before becoming the director of the DoD SBIR and STTR program for the Office of Secretary of Defense, Office of Small Business Programs. And for anyone who's familiar with SBIR programs, you know it's one of the incredible success stories. I'm biased a bit, but I think it's one of the incredible success stories within the Department of Defense. The sheer amount of innovation and creativity that's come out of that program has paid so many dividends for the government, for the department specifically. Prior to her work in small business, Ms. Frost served as a science technology program manager for over 10 years, working primarily in unmanned systems and ship logistics. Has a Bachelor of Science degree in Ocean Engineering from Florida Atlantic University and a Master of Science degree in Engineering Management from George Washington University. So, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today. I know our audience is very eager to hear about the work that you do in manufacturing and specifically in the manufacturing institutes. So,
Great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to share what we have going on and to see all the new activity happening in advanced manufacturing.
so if we could launch right in, could you tell our audience about the manufacturing institutes? What are they? How do they function? Give us the manufacturing institutes 101.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Manufacturing Innovation Institutes are public-private partnerships. I think that's the first sort of piece of this activity that's really unique. And sometimes folks don't always necessarily kind of understand that, I think, from the beginning. But we truly have established public-private partnerships with our institutes. So that that means that we have a nonprofit that's leading this effort. Really, we look at it as an industrial led effort, helping bring together all of the stakeholders across the United States. So, in supporting of advanced manufacturing. So, each institute has a unique technology, advanced manufacturing technology that they focus on. They really are chartered to bring together the stakeholders, whether you are a government employee at a lab or you are in academia doing research, or you're part of our industrial base, whether you're in a big company all the way to the smallest of our small companies. And as you mentioned, I used to be part of the and managing the SBIR program. So small businesses are really just a key to my heart in terms of the innovation pipeline and the work that we do here at the department. So the institute's goal is to bring together all of those stakeholders that are working in very specific advanced manufacturing technology spaces and really bring all of those challenges to the table to figure out how do we create a more robust ecosystem around each of these advanced technology areas, because there's a lot of activity going on in all of the different stakeholders or the sectors, right, that I mentioned, but bringing everybody to the table to look and roadmap and define where the unique challenges are, whether it's in the technology that's being developed or looking holistically at the ecosystem. If we develop the technology, why are we not transitioning it out to industry, and why is industry not using it? Why is do we have workforce issues, which we know that we do, and training challenges? It looks at the problem holistically. So I think that's what makes it very unique. These institutes really unique, and makes the public-private partnership just a really great model that we've been leveraging to create the capabilities coming out of these institutes. The other, I think, key point is that the these are not just while the federal agencies started these institutes. DoD stood the first one up 10 years ago with America Makes, which focuses on additive manufacturing and 3D printing. But they are sponsored by other federal agencies as well. So Department of Defense has 9 institutes that we sponsor, so 9 different technology spaces. Energy has 6 institutes that they sponsor, and Commerce has one institute that they sponsor. We work together as a network across the federal agencies and also then across the institutes and their membership. Their membership spans over 45 states. So it is not small number of people that are working through the institutes. And again, it really truly brings together the federal agency side and the industry side and the academics. The other key point is that while I mentioned that DoD and DOC, Commerce, and Energy sponsor these institutes, these are really national assets. They are meant to be used and utilized across the federal agencies. So Commerce and Energy participate actively, and other federal agencies in our institutes that we sponsor. Same thing with the Commerce and Energy institutes. So they really are a national resource advancing advanced manufacturing across a multitude of technology spaces. And really, there's something for everyone in terms of, if you, again, sit in government, if you sit in small business, if you are a student in high school, even. I have sent this out to many high schools. I just sat last night and watched a showcase and presentation by some high school teams that are partnering with our institutes in a program that teaches them entrepreneurship, teaches them engineering, and they solve basically a problem that they've identified with an advanced manufacturing solution to create a product, and they actually do the research on how they would bring that to market. So there really is something for everybody to get involved in these institutes.
So, how are the institutes? How are they constructed? Are there topic areas? Do you have cross-cutting areas? Are they specific to agency interests? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you would imagine, for each institute, of course, they are going to be focused on areas of interest to that institute or to that department, excuse me. So, for DoD institutes, certainly the areas that we have, we feel are important to create and support national security. However, I would say that the institutes are also very broadly applicable. So, as an example, I mentioned America Makes is additive manufacturing. Of course, the department, we buy back. What's very unique about our department, and I actually love this aspect of it, is that we are able to we buy back, right? We purchase what we invest in. So when we make scientific investments and investments in the industrial base, we're doing that to help shore up the industrial base for defense and national security needs. So we have them cross-cutting. We have fabrics and textiles, advanced fabrics and textiles institutes. There's composites institutes, lightweight materials, photonics. So there's some that are more nascent, biotechnology. We have 2 biotech institutes, one looking at bioindustrial manufacturing, so non-medical products, right? Growing non-medical products. And another one that's looking at regeneration of of organs and biological materials. So there's again a huge cross-cutting of the technology spaces.
And obviously, if say Department of Energy wants to leverage work being done at a DoD institute, that's something that I gather you make happen. That
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Each institute has a membership, but they also have they have a leadership council, or sometimes they call them executive councils. Members of these executive councils include government personnel from across, not just, so for institutes sponsored by DoD, not just defense, but also commerce, energy. We've got folks from transportation and Department of Labor, Department of Education, that all participate in the institutes. So they can sit on whether it's the leadership councils or there's a multitude of working groups, depending on what their interest is. As I mentioned, they really focus on advancing the technology itself, Also looking at the ecosystem of supply chain. What does what do our companies need to actually again bring that technology to a product and to market, and then also the workforce. Workforce is a huge pillar. So especially like Department of Labor and Department of Education, they're very involved in that aspect of all of the institutes across all three agencies.
Fascinating, fascinating. If I can actually focus, obviously one of our great manufacturing successes in recent history has been our response to COVID, and not only developing the vaccines but then producing them. I understand the manufacturing institutes had a role in that. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they did. I think and I mentioned that, we have membership across almost every state. And that was extremely helpful in quickly pivoting, and the institutes were able to mobilize their membership, again, their membership across industry and academia, and the network across the federal agencies and their partners to address pandemic related challenges. The biggest challenge that we saw immediately was not having access to PPE, especially for our healthcare workers, as they tried to, they were on the front lines of fighting the pandemic. So we were able to mobilize also our institutes in about, I think it took us about 4 to 5 weeks. We had received authorization for CARES Act funding to put towards COVID projects. We got those under contract within 4 to 5 weeks, and they were off. The institutes were off running. A couple examples. I mentioned America Makes again with 3D printing. They very quickly partnered with the Food and Drug Administration, National Institute of Health, and Veterans Affairs, and quickly developed a website where anyone around any community could log in and say, this is where I'm at. These are the needs I have for PPE. So medical community. And we also had a place where they could go to that same website. If you owned a 3D printer or had 3D printing capabilities, you could log in and say, hey, I'm in this area and I have this capability. And then they worked with, as I mentioned, FDA and NIH to quickly develop some 3D printing files so they could get them vetted. And we worked with some of the military as well to help do the testing and quickly get those files uploaded so anyone around the country could download those files and print PPE for their local medical community. So I think it was incredible how they were able to mobilize this large network across the US, but help specific regional areas, identifying manufacturers with the medical community needs and immediately match them up to just move out super
Right, really,
fast.
really quite a success story. Something to be very, very proud of. If I Let me switch gears a little bit. One of the things that we do at the Emerging Technologies Institute is think about, how we get new capabilities into the hands of the warfighter as quickly as possible. And of course, manufacturing always comes up. Supply chain issues, but manufacturability. And we're talking about a weapon capability. It's not enough to just deliver one or two. You've got to deliver, at scale that will make a difference to the warfighter. I'm wondering, in your mind, what are some of the biggest challenges to creating the defense industry of the future, especially as it relates to manufacturing?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and not an easy one to answer,
Yeah, right.
right?
Exactly.
um, there's multiple
Yeah.
challenges, but it's interesting because you said we have to bring it up to scale for the military. On one hand, we sometimes have a unique challenge because we are not buying products as in large quantities as maybe a retailer or another part of the industry. So on one hand, we're not always the biggest consumers, right? So it was important through these institutes that we continue to stay strategically involved in the road mapping for requirements. So that was key. The second,
Sorry to interrupt. Semiconductors immediately come to mind, right? Where the department consumes a
yeah,
very small percentage of the total semiconductor industry's output. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, it's fine. Absolutely, no, but absolutely,
yeah,
it's a great example. Absolutely. And so, how do we ensure that our requirements are acknowledged, right, and early on in the process, right? And then, how do we create the actual manufacturing capability? Because that capability not only is going to support economically, the country, and it's also going to support national security, right? So we need to have is the defense from the defense side, we want to make sure that the industrial base is able to support the defense needs. But again, as I said, we're not the biggest consumer. However, we do need to buy things typically, in certain large quantities. But I think our challenge is also is we need it in the quantity we need when we
Mm-hmm.
need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
time frame we need it, and at a cost, and as low a cost as possible, right? Is reasonable. The lower the cost, the more we can supply our warfighters with. And so that's the challenge. We have a strong need, but we're not the biggest consumers. I think in general, though, when I kind of step back, the other thing is we talk about the defense industrial base. There certainly is a defense industrial base. However, you just mentioned semiconductors, which is that a defense industry? No, right? That's across the board, a product that everybody needs. So I think we're also in a unique situation where we do want to focus. We need to understand like there's larger investment priorities that defense will support national security, but also the whole U.S. And there's other areas that are very defense specific. You'll notice if you go to and I can give you some websites later, but if you go to the institutes and sort of look through the topic areas, they're not all defense specific, and they probably shouldn't be, because to create a network that large, we really need it to be industry driven. And industry needs to be able to see the marketability of investing upfront in these capabilities. If they don't, they're not gonna make that investment, right? Our institutes, I think I failed to mention earlier, but our institutes require typically a one-to-one cost share to the government funding. So every dollar that DoD puts in, there's non-federal funding that's matched against that dollar. So we really have both sides have skin in the game on the on these investments. But I think to kind of, I was starting to step back, I guess, and saying like the defense industrial base. So again, I really look at it as we lean on the whole industrial base. So it's not, we've talked for a very long time about this defense industrial base, and it exists. But I really want to, and saw this through working with the small businesses. We really want to open up that pipeline so that all small businesses, particularly, can play in the defense needs, the defense areas or areas that DoD is going to rely on, because the innovation that comes out of small business is incredible, and we really need to harness as much of that as possible and transition that to our large defense, like prime contractors, right? That really do have that focus on the developing the products and the platforms. But we really want to, from earlier stages, we really want to harness the power of the small businesses, because it's just incredible, and we lose out on a lot of innovation if we don't do that. And so when we talk about defense industrial base, I sometimes get a little like, well, let's open the pipeline a little bit bigger. We really want to tap into the whole
Yeah,
industrial base
no,
where we
that
can.
absolutely makes sense. I know at NDIA we have a lot of companies that will join us. Often they haven't worked in the defense sector, but they think they have something that might be of value to the defense sector, and so that's why they get involved with this. And I hear that quite often. Like how do I take my commercial product and deliver it to defense? Uh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, big question we get, and I along those same lines. When I was working closer with the SBIR program, the small businesses, they have these innovations or even a product, they don't know how to manufacture it, and they don't know how to get over that hump. And I don't know if industry calls it this, but I know that the defense side does, and folks involved in the defense industrial base, we like the term Valley of Death, and it really is something that we're sort of um, it's not, I start to think of it. It's not a natural valley. It is the way some of our systems are set up, and we're really changing the tide in that space and attacking that problem. But it's sort of a self-inflicted problem that we have a lot of funding going into basic research and all this innovation, and then we have a lot of acquisition happening, and you got to figure out that piece in the middle, and that's really where these institutes come to play, because manufacturing is a huge part of that challenge, where you've got this innovation, but they got to figure out how to manufacture it, or can we manufacture it with using advanced manufacturing that will create that product, smaller, lighter, cheaper, how, making it easier for us to purchase, and for, if it's can be a commercial product as well, to be produced commercially, or purchased commercially. But one of the, I think we also have a challenge in, accessing like demonstration facilities and pilot facilities That's a huge issue that I know that we're also attacking through the institutes. And then I mentioned workforce a couple times. I never want to forget that because our our workforce is so critical. If we don't have that, you don't really have anything. If they don't, if we don't have the training and the skill sets, through the workforce, you don't have anybody
Yeah,
actually doing the work.
and
So
I assume that by
super
that
critical.
workforce is all encompassing. So it's not just the bachelor's, master's, PhD graduates, but it's also the technically trained, the the folks who know how to run the machines and put the bolts on and make the models and put the strain gauges and just
Yeah.
keep the parts running. I assume that that's a part of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The technician level is so important to manufacturing, and it doesn't have to always be a 4 year or plus college degree. I mean, it can be. We do need engineers and scientists at that level, but I think the technician level is very overlooked, both in sort of our schooling systems and with the guidance counselors and even parents. And I feel like I'm in that generation that's kind of in the middle. I had parents that worked in factories. I had one that worked in a factory that dealt with very hot metals and made serving pieces, basically, things you would have on your dining room table. Um, and I walked through that factory, and it was hot, and it was dirty, and it could be very, very dangerous if you got near the wrong parts of the machines. I also had a parent that worked in the shipbuilding business, and so I spent many
Okay.
years running around a shipyard in Surprise. And I'd love to see the machinery. I would talk to all the machinists. I'd ask them how they make things. That kind of sparked my interest in engineering. But I really, in the satisfaction of watching something basically come from, from just raw materials turn into a fishing boat. And then eventually, my dad got into building race boats. And so it was incredible to watch that process. When I was in college, I actually worked at the factory as well, helping out in the business office, but I would still walk the shop floor, and I was like, it's just so fascinating to me to watch this happen. But now, I came from the generation where my parents said, "You must go to college." That was an opportunity for us, but we worked hard and we worked our way up in our companies, and but you're going to go to college. And now we're kind of looking back. I love talking to my parents about the advanced manufacturing that we're seeing and the things that are happening, because to them it's also incredible that the opportunities to get into manufacturing is not, they're in clean rooms, they're working besides robots, it's not necessarily the dirty and dangerous and hot environments that traditionally we think of as manufacturing. I mean, some of that still exists, and it always probably will, but a lot of these advanced manufacturing spaces are in clean rooms, and again, like working next to robotics, and they're skills that are buildable. So technicians can come in with some basic training and build skills as they kind of progress through different job opportunities. So I really think changing the way that the society looks at manufacturing is really important. It's going to be important in recruiting from students, looking at current workforce that want to be either reskilled into a new career, or upskilling our current workforce into these new advanced technologies. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and it's a matter of having training accessible, having people understand that the training is out there. And if I could do a quick plug for, there's two websites also for training that I would recommend. One is very specific around the robotics industry. So our Robotics Institute arm has a website called robotics. Let me make sure I get this right. Roboticscareers.org. That is the website you can go to. You can, if you are a student or a current worker, you can go in and put in your location. You can put in the type of program you're looking for, and it pops up with a list. I actually was looking for my nephew where he lives in a different state. I put in the state and the area and found programs and sent it to him, and said, this is where you should look for training. If you're an employer, and you're looking to upskill, or find students that are looking for this training, that are being trained, that's also a great website. And then we also have, spelled out with no spaces, manufacturingworkforce.org, also offers training through our institutes. So it provides training from the technician level up to current engineers and scientists, kind of grad level, type training that you can pull down off that website. And right now, I think there's about 9 courses, but they're adding more all the time to it.
Very excellent. Excellent. Coming back to your comment about understanding manufacturing, I was reminded that Kelly Johnson, the legendary founder of the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, always arranged his factory so that his engineers had to walk through the machine shop on their way into their office, and so they could see things being built. So they could make that connection between the lines that they were drawing on the paper and what was actually manufacturable. And it sounds like you had a very, very similar experience. So along those lines, let me ask, how can our listeners get involved? I mean, you've given us you've made some, you talked about a few opportunities, but if our listeners are interested in getting involved in manufacturing institutes, what can they do?
So a couple things. I've mentioned the institutes themselves. I would highly recommend you can go to a couple websites. One is DoDmantech.mil. So it's DoDmantech, all no spaces. I want to say all one word, but that's not a word. But DoDmantech.mil. And then manufacturingusa.com. Again, no spaces. Manufacturingusa.com. You can check out all of the institutes there. I would encourage anybody that wants more information, contact the institute directly. From the Mantech website, you'll find our contact information out of my office. You can reach out to us and we'll help you make the connection as well. And then also there's a defense manufacturing conference that is hosted every year by my office. It is this year, the 2022 conference is December 5th through the 8th down in Tampa, Florida. So if you just Google DMC 2022, that will pop up as well. And then lastly, I would say working with you in your office and NDIA manufacturing division. I've worked really closely with the NDIA a good majority of my career, and I really appreciate the work that you guys do. I worked a lot with the small business division at first, and then now I've worked a lot with the manufacturing division as well. And I highly recommend that's the place where we also connect with industry and academia, and really we try to attend a lot of the division meetings and provide updates when we can. So that's another great resource. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Tracy Frost. First of all, thank you for all that you do. Thank you thanks to you for your service to our nation. You're filling such a vital role, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been incredibly informative.
I did too. Thank you for having me. Really. Take care.